He backed 14 companies from scratch, went public in London, but he's just getting started.
Most great entrepreneurs eventually become unemployable.
Oliver Yonchev, the man behind the scenes at Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett's right-hand man for over a decade. Shiny object syndrome.
Though I'm guilty as charged.
He knows exactly what separates the ones who make it.
Because entrepreneurship will humble you. It is chewing glass.
And he invests in a lot of companies right now. But what does he ultimately look for? A business plan? A financial model?
Relevant.
Really?
Absolutely.
My name is Uptin. I got laid off in 2020, started a company, and sold it in 2025. Today I make videos about tech and money, and meet the boldest business people on the planet. This is What's Uptin. All right, Oliver, thank you so much for sitting down with me here in LA.
I'm excited to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your background. You've worked with Stephen Bartlett, you've started multiple companies.
Yeah, so my background is 15 years in entrepreneurship. I started as a musician, so creative is really important to me. And over the course of 15 years, I've experienced the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. I've experienced day zero, I've experienced the IPO. And after a decade of working with Stephen together, I decided to set up an investment office called Co-Created, primarily to back creative entrepreneurs in this current technology moment. And because my belief is that the archetype of what will make a successful founder is going to evolve because of technology. And I think creatives have certain advantages.
I gotta ask, what was it like to work with Stephen?
Oh, amazing. Stephen's one of my best friends. He's been a mentor. He really peeled back the curtain for me in what's possible. I grew up in a small town in the north of England, and I've been somewhat delusionally ambitious throughout my life, but you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And working with Stephen and seeing what he's gone on to achieve and being in that proximity, I've learned a hell of a lot.
What do you think it is about his style in his podcast that makes him consistently number one on so many charts?
So what Stephen will do today is he makes effort look effortless. That he is a byproduct of extreme hard work. Mm. And what I mean by that, his obsession over detail, the work on himself, the thirst for knowledge. His success is by no means luck. It's pure intention, work ethic, and obsession. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about you. You left the company that you
Yes.
had with him. You exited Flight Story.
Yes.
And what have you been doing since then?
So since then, I started an investment office that focuses on day zero companies. I love a blank sheet of paper. I think at the start of a business journey is arguably the most exciting, but it's also one of the most challenging because you typically will lack focus. You're trying to find your fit in the world. You're trying to galvanize people's attention with very little resources. And I think with the right support structure and the right mentorship, you can make that process easier. So I set up an investment office 2 years ago called Co-Created. And then since then, we've incubated 14 businesses, a range of tech-enabled services and some software products. And one of the things that we will be doing recently, one of our incubations will be doing something called an RTO, like an IPO, in London in a couple of weeks. I will say, for the lawyers, subject to AIM approvals.
All right.
But that's something I'm really excited about because it embodies everything I believe as a product, as a business, as a vision. It embodies everything that I believe is important in this new technology moment.
So you said yes to 14 companies. How many do you think you said no to? Hundreds?
Possibly, yes, hundreds. We've seen thousands of businesses, and when you're investing and backing an early stage business, ultimately a business plan is irrelevant, a financial model is irrelevant.
Really?
Absolutely. The only things that matter is the founder or founding team, and you look for qualities and characteristics that you believe will lead to their success. And the other is, conceptually, is it an idea we like? And is it something we can add value to? We're not passive capital. We're hands-on in the trenches with the companies that we support.
So when you say it really boils down to the person and the team.
Always.
Is that because I know there's this thing with hiring where it's like you can be the most qualified person, but at the end of the day, as a hiring manager, I just want to hire the person that I would love to have a beer with, right?
Yes.
There's that connection. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes and no. So chemistry matters in a team. You want people that have complementary skill sets. Typically what a lot of people do when they hire generalists. They look for people that don't show any weaknesses. Really what you should do is hire for strength. But in the confines of a team, the best work you will ever do is usually because you're working with someone that brings the best out in you, that can do things that you can't, that thinks in a way that you don't.
What are some of the skills or qualities in this, let's say 14, aside from the business idea that you said, you know what, this guy really stood out or girls really stood out?
Yeah, number one is domain authority. I think every problem that you try and solve has a culture that underpins it. And if you have a lived experience, you have a very different relationship with that problem. What you see often in entrepreneurship is people build things in fields that they don't understand. And that's not to say you can't be successful. Some of the most successful businesses in the world started that way, but I think it is a big advantage to have domain expertise. Second quality that I look for is just the classic archetype of entrepreneurship: resilient, obsessed, work ethic. I'm going to bundle that all into kind of one aspect. And then the final piece is I really rate entrepreneurs that are humble, because entrepreneurship will humble you. It is chewing glass a lot of the time. And if you have too much ego, you have to have belief, but never conflate that with too much ego. So humility really matters, and the founders that we've backed that are most successful share many of those traits.
How about the traditional credentials, PhD, master's, even undergrad? Do you look at those or even care?
So I don't know if this is controversial or not. I think there are signals when people have had success in academia, or they've worked or they've been employed by a big name or something of that nature. Yes, they are good soft signals, but ultimately it never matters.
Sometimes it's almost the opposite, like dropout is sometimes a flex.
Well, most people that are great entrepreneurs, eventually, whether they start that way or not, they become unemployable. So you have to be a bit audacious to think you can build value from nothing. You have to be ambitious. A lot of the time, we all have many flaws, but you have to be a bit insecure, a chip on your shoulder. There's usually a bit more to the story. But why do this really difficult thing? And for some people, it's financially motivated, but for many others, there's something deeper there.
One of the things I notice, starting with millennials, and now I see it even more with Gen Z, is shiny object syndrome.
Yes.
So they're onto a mission, they're onto a project, and then all of a sudden they think of another idea, or someone says, hey, come in on this idea with me, and essentially they drop what they're working on and pick up another shiny object. Is that something you're seeing, and how do you navigate the portfolio companies that you invest in to stay focused?
So I'm guilty as charged. I do have shiny toy syndrome. As someone that loves technology, my eye is caught often. How do you avoid that? I think you have to zoom out. It's really important that you have context, and technology to me should always be in service of people. I think that's always a first foundation if you're building a technology product. The second thing is you should always build around the basics, around your audience. And I think yes, you can be flexible in how you deliver a product or service, but if you're very clear on who you serve, the audience, then that is a really good foundation. And in my belief, shiny new toy syndrome can serve you. It means you'll lean into new innovation. It means you'll often be at the forefront. But when you have those signals that you're onto something, meaning you've got some momentum in your business, you're acquiring customers, you're getting those feedback loops that reaffirm what you're doing, then it's time to focus. I consider it as kind of surface area. It's really important early. You do have lots of surface area, lots of touch points, take lots of feedback. But when you get a signal and focus.
I imagine there were instances where you had to call it quits on a project. Do you have any regrets, or that you called it quits earlier, or how do you see when the time is right to say, you know what, it's not going to work?
For anyone in any endeavor to start a new chapter, you have to quit something else. And it's very hard. Quitting is usually your social circle is attached to your work endeavors or your professional endeavors. I tend to have a pretty simple quitting framework. Everything that I want to do is usually difficult and challenging. And I ask myself the simple question, would I be willing to do this for the next decade? And is the struggle worth it? And if at any point I pivot after I've slept on it to that and it sticks with me for longer than a couple of weeks, then it's the signal to you to listen to yourself and make a different choice.
So it's almost like you yourself, your connection and your passion for what you're working on more than the market is taking it or not?
Yeah, it depends on your motives. I think if you're intrinsically motivated, I get value being part of great teams and having built some successful businesses. I get motivation out of momentum, working with great people and doing difficult things. So as long as I am being served with those aspects in my life, that's all the fuel that I need.
So you mentioned working with great people.
Yes.
Are you seeing teams shrink as a result of AI?
Oh, absolutely. It was actually in part one of the motivations of setting up Co-Created. I believe there is a shadow to the industry where there is going to be huge displacement, and people that typically wouldn't have set up a business may be forced into it, but there aren't enough platforms that help people through the earliest stage. If you have an idea, your path is filled with unknown unknowns, there needs to be platforms to do that, and that was part of the motivation of Co-Created. I believe today we do have to think a little differently about organizational design, and often I tend to view it as building teams more like a Formula One team right now. Small, lean teams with minimal handoff points of people that are specialized in their domain with a very narrow focus, augmented by technology.
So give me an example, because you said that you believe there are not enough platforms for an early stage entrepreneur, but I mean, aren't there more platforms than ever? I mean, if you have these people doing Claude Code and they're doing apps, even things like Kajabi or Teachable or Patreon. I mean, there's so many, even now this year than there was last year. So what's missing?
I think it's missing. So you have a thriving venture ecosystem, but venture capital is a game for the few. If you're not building a business that has global ambition, that is a moonshot, then venture capital isn't for you. And I think particularly we're here on a trade mission. In the US, a large proportion of the US, you've got an entrepreneurial spirit that exists within the nation. Lots of small businesses. In the UK, there's a slightly different relationship with business. And I don't believe there are enough places to go if you just want to build a good SME, a good small to medium-sized business that isn't trying to be a world beater but gives you the income.
You're saying within the UK there's not enough?
There's not enough support platforms, I don't think so.
In general?
In general, yes.
I see. So on the note of US, UK, you lived in New York.
I did, yes.
You now live back in London. What differences do you see there within entrepreneurship, startups?
So in Britain, we are very self-deprecating. And in America, less so. And it's one of the things I deeply admired about living in New York is just the energy, the audacity, and the confidence. And I think if you are entering entrepreneurship or business building, that spirit will serve you very, very well. So I tried to carry that through into the work that I do today. But that's the biggest thing I admire about America is just the ambition. And I would love British entrepreneurs to experience America and take some of that with them because I think it will serve them well.
Do you see change happening in the UK because you have stats of young people, less optimistic about their future? You have young people maybe leaving to go register their company in Dubai or in Singapore. Are you hopeful for more entrepreneurial spirit and more incentives to build and stay?
I'm conflicted because the picture for young people is difficult. You know, as you're growing up, you're forming your identity, you know, we're all addicted to our phones. We're all seeing the 1% of beauty, the 1% of talent, and it creates this really unnatural picture for young people and sets an expectation for their life. However, I say I'm conflicted because I believe as a young person, you have so many advantages today. A lot of the limitations that you had in the past are no longer there. You mentioned it before, platforms like Kajabi, and you can become a creator. You can have millions of people hear your ideas and see what you're doing through social media. You can now fill in any knowledge gaps with AI and the resources available to you. You can 10x your productivity by building workflows around some aspects that you want to build in your life. So I think it's a wonderful time to be a young person and pursue entrepreneurship. But I am conflicted because I do recognize the unique challenges that face the next generation, because the paths that many people of my generation and before walked, they will not exist in the future.
Do you think they exist now? If you were to start out what you built, if you were to start that today?
It's becoming, do they exist now? In some part, yes, but it's much more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I had one bit of advice to a young person, it would be high agency. Start doing a side hustle. Start learning
even if you have a
skills,
full-time job.
Even if you have a full-time job, because those qualities that you learn through the process of doing that will serve you in a corporate career, because the expectations of corporate employees are going to evolve. So I think you can gain what I call digital leverage.
Yeah. I love this term intrapreneurship, where you're an entrepreneur but within a wider organization. And I think companies need that more and more. And it's, you know, we're reading about so many layoffs constantly right now. It's how you differentiate yourself as an employee.
Yeah, and I think that's how you create leverage. You don't have the 10 years behind you of experience, but you could be the foremost authority within the room of how to set automations or how to play with OpenClaw or, you know, there's so much you could go and do as a young person in a corporate environment.
Do you think we will have a day, potentially in the near future, where there's a universal basic income because there's just not enough jobs?
A big question. I don't know. I really don't know. I think there will be a new economic order, and we do have to, everyone from policymakers to influential companies, all the stakeholders, I do think there should be open dialogue around these things. But do I have a strong opinion on the slightly distant future? I don't.
What is a startup that nobody is building right now that someone absolutely should be building?
What is a startup that's...
Or industry or idea?
So I spend a lot of time thinking about technology and how to apply technology to solve problems. However, I think there is a huge amount of opportunity in looking outside of the norms of what technology is going to influence. So I think experience-based businesses. I think community-based businesses, things in the real world, the things that AI is not going to eat. I think there's a lot of merit in focusing in those areas.
Yeah, I like that. I think, you know, the concept of the third space.
Yes.
So we had our job, we had our office, we had our home, and our third space was maybe the gym or the bar or maybe a little bit of both. Now it seems like a lot of people are working from home, and the concept of the third space is being lost. But there is absolutely an epidemic around loneliness and human connection.
Yes.
And it does seem like I think the challenge there is that, like, we're trying to use technology to fix the challenge around human connection, but technology is also the culprit. So how do you do that, you know?
Yeah, well, you said it there. It's almost the human truth. I think what isn't going to change, people will want belonging. They want connection. They want to feel part of something. If you can create a business around those constructs, that's a really good foundation or North Star to pursue.
Even I think by now a lot of people thought we would, you know, have way more AI influencers, and we don't know what's AI and what's not. And largely that is true, you know, but when it comes to me as a content creator is, am I worried about, oh, these AI influencers will be, competing with me? Not so much, because people are drawn to people.
Yes.
The second you see that it's AI or you sense that something is AI, you're just not as connected to that story.
Yeah. Well, you have the word artificial. If I said that in any other environment, you wouldn't have a positive reaction.
True. Imagine food.
Yeah. Any artificial additives. If I said your friend's artificial, that wouldn't be a compliment.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
the idea is we do have an allergic reaction to things, and I believe the human truth and what we create and things that we produce, that increases in value over time as more and more things do get commoditized.
Final question, what keeps you up at night right now?
What keeps me up at night? So I am working on, I mentioned before, a business called Potentially. I am obsessed over it. It's a moonshot business, and I'll give you the simple premise and pitch. We've built a series of products that help you protect and monetize what you create with AI. And for me, I think much of technology is disempowering right now. We talk about job losses, we talk about technology replacing the things that we do, and not enough people are building around empowering people. So that's what we intend and are doing with Potentially. And as I said, we're taking an unusual path and going public with that business very soon. So I'm very excited about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Amazing.
sitting down with me. This was a great conversation,
Yeah,
Oliver.
likewise.
And have a great trip back to the UK.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of What's Uptin, where I bring you inside the minds driving tech, money, and power. Follow along on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow my personal account on Instagram at Uptin. Would love to connect with you.